Hey guys, welcome to our On the Dyno series. I'm Bob Morreale, your host, and today I'm going to be discussing how to diagnose a no-start situation with whatever vehicle you happen to be working on. It could be gas, it could be diesel. The principles remain very much the same, and so I'm going to go through a real-world example of one that we diagnosed recently and actually went through the whole process of finding several problems, which should cover most of the problems you're probably going to have. So let's go ahead and get started. We approach a vehicle to determine why it will not start. What we're assuming is that it will crank. What crank means is you go in and turn the ignition all the way and the key gets, all the way on and you hear the engine spinning, but it doesn't fire up and run. So if you're at that point, this is where we can help you. So the thing is with the vehicle we were diagnosing, yeah, we had the same thing. It would crank, but it would not actually run. So there is kind of an order to diagnosing these things. So the first thing we did was we said, okay, let's go ahead and get our software set up and scanning so that we can take a look at what's actually going on from the computer's perspective. Now, if you're old school, and that's cool, I came from old school. I have a lot of old gauges. I still put a fuel pressure gauge on a Schrader valve sometimes, but a lot of these cars and trucks don't have them anymore. So you have to rely on the vehicle's computer to tell you what's going on. So yes, you can still do the same approach using old school gauges. The first thing we want to know is what? Well, does the computer know that it should be running the vehicle? I don't know. And so when you have this situation a lot is with swap vehicles. Almost everybody and their brother does an LS swap these days, right? So then they go, man, why doesn't it fire up? They turn off the anti-theft. Almost everybody gets that right. Or their tuner turns off the anti-theft so it'll run, but they go to crank it and it still won't fire. So I'm just going to show you in our scan here, looking from top to bottom. This is a scan. It is not of an LS, but like I said, it is of the more recent thing that we were working on. This was actually a small diesel. But here's the thing. This showed 0 RPM while we were actually cranking it. And how do I know for sure we were actually cranking it if we can't see RPM other than the fact that I was there turning the key? Well, if you look, there's some other indicators. So as the engine cranked, take a look at the blue here. You have MAF, you see it actually starts to see some airflow. That's actually a relatively good sign. That means the computer isn't dead. It means that it knows there's air coming in, and then it also means that you can look at some other things. Now, you can go, well, are my other sensors doing well? Sure, but I probably wouldn't spend a whole lot of time there just yet. Because in our case here, you see there is no RPM as it continues to spin over. So, how would you diagnose this? Well, the first thing I would do is I would go look at the crank sensor. In our case, they simply forgot to plug it in. We literally got all the way down there. We couldn't really see it very well, so we grabbed a meter and we checked it and realized it actually wasn't plugged in. So I know it sounds stupid, but the reality is when you do a swap or really any kind of thing, you're gonna find either the wiring harness is bad or there's breaks in the harness and it's touching metal somewhere, or in our case, it just wasn't plugged in. So what I would do is I would grab your gauges, grab your meters, whatever you gotta do, and start probing and figuring out, is the signal leaving the crank sensor? If it's leaving the crank sensor, go up to the other side where the ECM is. Is the signal making it to there? Once you've done that, you can tell whether or not that's your problem. In our case, we just plugged it in and said, okay, cool. Let's go ahead and do some more cranking. We did, and guess what we found? Well, we may have had crank at that point. However, we didn't have fuel pressure. Looking down through the rest of this, we can say we have manifold pressure. The computer knows we should be making some torque. The computer is doing some commands for boost controls. Everything's alive and well, but if you look down here at the very bottom, what do you see? Well, guys, it doesn't take much to run an engine. It takes fuel, air, and spark. Well, we know it's getting air. How do we know it's getting air? Well, we said earlier, here it is, it's showing it. We now, at this point, although I don't have it in the scan, we were actually getting RPM. We were seeing it spin over, but it still wouldn't start. And so we said, okay, well, what's left of those three things? Well, does it get fueled? Is it having fuel? So we added fuel rail pressure. Now, we don't have a Schrader valve on this thing, so we can't tell if it physically has pressure, but it has a pressure sensor on the rail, in which case it says I'm commanding fuel rail pressure command 25,300 kPa. That's a lot. What is it actually getting, which is here in red? It says 780. Kind of confused me at first, but as it turned out, that was just the minimum baseline that it would ever report. Right or wrong, that was it. So how do we diagnose that? We actually took and removed the hose from the rail and verified there's no fuel coming out here. So in our case, we did some more looking and we said, well, are we not commanding it? No, we're commanding it. What should we be seeing here? There's got to be some fuel coming up here. So it turns out the fuel pump was being commanded on, but just like every other swap or whatever you're ever going to find, it was leaking everywhere and it wasn't actually going out the hose all the way up to the engine to the fuel rail. So the computer was doing its job. It was commanding fuel pressure. The pump was running, but it turned out the pump was just spewing fuel back into the tank as opposed to getting it up to the engine. So I know that's a long way of getting there, but guys, look at this. Look at the outcome here. Let me show you the difference here. This is our scan with crank sensor plugged in and a fix on the fuel pump. So when the fuel pump engaged and it sent fuel, it actually made it to the engine. So here it is now, idling 823 RPM. And what else is our data showing us? We have good airflow, so everything's looking good. We have good manifold pressure. We have fuel and boost being commanded. And this is actually no boost being commanded. It's just atmospheric pressure. So don't think it idle. It's looking at 15 pounds boost. But this is the real thing down here, guys, that you got to look at. And this is what confirms that what our ears are telling us, this thing's actually running, is actually happening because it's commanding 28,600 kPa fuel. It's actually getting 28,496, and it's really close. If you look at these lines, they really do overlay. And so guys, one of the things I always recommend, if you have a no start, even before you go too crazy, check all your sensors and also take 5 minutes, set up your scanner like we did here. Look for the parameters that are important. What is that? That's fuel, that's spark. Does this thing know it has crank? Does it know engine RPM? If you set those up, just take 5 minutes and start looking through it methodically one at a time, you will find the source of your problem. So, thanks for watching. That's all I've got time for today. Stay tuned.